What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Tech Talkin'. I'm your host, Jamison Redding, and we got an awesome show coming out for you tonight. I know it looks like I'm kind of looking over here, but I got multiple computer screens, so I'll try to remember to look it to the camera. But thank you guys for joining us another week here. This is our 4th episode, and I'm really excited about it because this is something that I don't know a lot about. 2 things. We're going to be talking fly fishing from a kayak, but we're also going to be talking about chasing big toothy critters, and that's muskie and pike. We got an awesome guest tonight, Brian Cadoret. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. We'll bring him on in a minute. He's been a Jackson team member for a long time. He's also a guide, so he spends a lot of time on the water chasing these big toothy critters up in the Northeast, and we got a lot of information coming from him. I did want to share with you guys tonight, and thanks for joining. Looks like we got a few people on already, but we're doing a really cool thing with Fish USA. And I'm reading it right now because I want to make sure I get it right. For the next 30 days, and actually that was since last Monday. So looking at the calendar, I think around the 4th. So until the 4th, if you are looking to purchase that Jackson kayak, if you go to Fish USA, we're going to get you $100 on a future purchase at Fish USA. But the really cool thing is we're also going to send $100 to Rethink Food NYC, and that's to feed those in need that are being affected by this virus. Again, that's a partnership between Jackson and Fish USA. So if you're looking to get a kayak, you can stay at home. You can still shop online through Fish USA, and then that's going to help support that awesome cause because we definitely want to stay positive through all this. And I think I don't want to say we're definitely not out of the woods, but I'm hoping that we're kind of reaching that peak of all this, and I hope everyone's staying healthy and safe and staying positive, and we're all in this together. So what better time to really rethink that gear, and that's what Tech Talkin's all about, going through the technical aspects of rigging, whether it's kayak fishing or even just your rod and reel setups, your baits, your knots, and those kinds of things. So if you haven't already, definitely check out our show again. This is episode 4. We're here on the Jackson page and the YouTube channel at the same time. I want to walk over to some of these comments. Of course, Gene Wilson's on. Thanks for joining us, Gene. Looks like we got a few other people, but definitely post up in the comments where you're from and any questions that you might have when it comes to fly fishing from a kayak or when it comes to pike and muskie. And a lot of these things are going to be applicable. That's a big word for me. But whether you're fishing in the Northeast, in rivers up there, or even like we have down here in North Carolina, we've got muskie as well. We don't have the pike, but that's why I'm really excited about tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Brian on screen. Brian, what is up, man?
Hey, how you doing today?
Pretty good, man. I was just reading Gene's comment. He said that he's going to watch this muted so I can just watch the beard. That might be an interesting. I probably look better if you just listen to it muted than I do if you watch muted. But I thank you, Brian, for coming on tonight for sure. And like I told you kind of in the pre-thing that I'm excited about this as well because muskie have eluded me, and I'm waiting for James Macbeth, our marketing director, to join in and just give me a hard time about how hard I tried. I know I told you that I chased him up there in Canada with him for several days and just had no luck and watched fish after fish get caught by those guys. And by no means am I saying that James is, the world champion fisherman that he thinks he is, even though he's won 2 consecutive world championships. But anyway, give us a little background about yourself. How long have you been kayak fishing and how'd you get into it?
Well, thanks for having me and knowing James and having gone a lot of good laughs up there on the big rivers, and if you hung out with him, you probably grilled up some good food too.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a fun person to hang out with and be around. But there's always that little aspect of competition that keeps it interesting.
Yeah. So I think I've been on the Jackson kayak fishing team since 2011, maybe it was 2012, and before that, I did a lot of my fishing out of canoes, friends' boats, and a lot of walk-in wading. And I saw a big advantage of the kayak because the ones that Jackson were making had, you know, in a canoe, you just put everything in the canoe and you're standing on it and it's getting wet on the bottom. But the kayaks have all the storage and it's just well thought out. And so I was able to get in one of those with Damon and ordered up one. And it's just, I never looked back. I started with a Kusa.
Nice.
Went to the big rig. Last year I was in 2019 models, the big rig HD and the Bite. And I've loved every one of them. And I'm about to order the U-Pick, a brand new one again.
Yeah, and we were talking about this again in the pre thing. You know, with fly fishing, you kind of like having that clean space. You're not really rigging the boat out like, say, you know, a guy that's doing a lot of tournament bass fishing would. So, you know, the big rig, very clean boat, and then the Bite you were in, very clean space, and then now the U-Pick. And I think, like you said, like again, we were kind of pre-talking about this, guys, but that clean open space is kind of key, because I know for me the frustrating part is line management when I'm trying to fly fish from a kayak. So I definitely want to dive into that a little bit with you. But I also want to pull up, I mean, some of these monster fish that you sent me a picture of. Like, I'm just going to go ahead with it. Like, look at this. This thing is, this is a monster, dude. Like,
yeah. And so, so this fish in particular was just a few minutes from my house, and I literally had, you know, maybe a half an hour to fish. And normally when I had a half an hour to fish, I would just stand on the shore or, you know, go waist deep in water. But the ease of just sliding the kayak into the river and getting to hit a few corners that you can't from the shore, literally, like my 10th cast that day, I saw that one come out from a log jam and just destroy a fly, and was able to land it, get that quick photo, get a good release, and then head out. That was my half hour. But, you know, I got that one fish, and I couldn't.
That's like a fish of a lifetime for a lot of people, and you're like, yeah, I did it in half an hour.
Yeah, well, the GoPro adds a few pounds, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure. Believe me, I know.
That's what we have to tell ourselves. But, you know, yeah, it's hard to get a picture of a fish like that and make it look small. That's for sure. But the kayak was able to get to where it was. Nothing else could have done it. There's no boat launch there. You know, it was in the middle of the river, casting to the shore to a log jam, and there's just no way I could have got that in a half an hour.
Well, that's for sure. I think what led, you know, me as well to get into kayak fishing is just like you said, being able to get and access water that you can't get to otherwise. So that's pretty sweet. Gene says that's quite a nice 30 minutes. Yeah, I would say. Like,
yeah.
If I could just take 30 minutes and knock that fish just, you know, off the bucket list, I might could move on with my life, but I might not be able to.
Yeah, and then it's just, that's how it goes. And then maybe I did a 6-hour float the next time, and I didn't even, you know, move a fish. So that's just how it goes. And I think part of the reason why I've been able to lucky enough to land a few nice fish like that is just I'm able to go a lot of random times by myself and just go.
So how are you? I mean, I know you guide. You guide full time. Is that your kind of full time gig?
No, I co-own a popular fly fishing guide service in Vermont with Brian Zinger.
Nice.
He lives in northern Vermont, and I live in Middlebury, so the central part of Vermont. And most of our guiding is for trout. That's our bread and butter. We do a lot of smallmouth, pike. We guide for pike, and that's pretty much it. I mean, if someone else really wants to catch a certain kind of fish that we have in Vermont, most likely we can get them onto that fish. But trout, bass, pike, some steelhead, maybe some landlocked Atlantic salmon that are kind of in the spring and fall, we can do that.
Nice.
And most of our stuff is walk and wade. And then on my days off, that's when I'm in my kayak.
So how long have you been doing that? How long have you been guiding?
I think I've been guiding for 12 or 15 years. It blends together. But we've got a great thing going, and there's a lot of other great services in Vermont, and everyone's pretty friendly. And sometimes if we can't book a trip, we give it to a friend who's a guide, and vice versa. It's
nice.
It's a pretty
so you guys
cool,
are working together for sure.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool scene in Vermont. We just want people to learn some new water, learn some new techniques, and sometimes people are like, they're coming from an area that has stocked rainbows and browns, but they've never actually seen a brook trout.
Yeah.
So they really want to catch a brook trout, and so it's each situation's different, but we try to show people a great time and in a safe manner, and get a good photo and get a good experience for them. We're almost like fun facilitators in that way, where some trips there's a lot of pressure to really put someone on a fish, but a lot of people just you bring them up to a Green Mountain National Forest, they step out of the car on a dirt road, and that's good enough for them right there. They're relaxed.
Yeah.
And we get lost in the mountains for a few hours, and then they just have a great time.
Well, I know for me, I would just have to have a great time being lost in the mountains, because obviously I struggle with catching muskie and probably with pike as well. But I want to dive into that a little bit, and we'll kind of start going through the technical rigging. I know that's what people are here to find out about, is how they can put more of these guys in their boat. So I think a good way to kind of lead into that is, how do you manage your fly gear and stuff in a kayak? Because that's going to kind of cross over with other species as well. But what is your setup? What is your go-to rig on the kayak and keeping it clean and whatnot?
All right. And so one last thought is that a lot of times when I'm guiding a brook trout trip, or a normal sized trout, then I'm actually going to my fly box and I'm getting flies out that are the same size or bigger than the trout we're catching. Tie that onto an 8, 10, 12 weight. And I usually go out in a kayak with 2 rods rigged. Basically, so I have 2 different flies ready. But if something goes wrong, if you've taken the time to not be working, you're not with your family, you're out fishing, and you paddle into a remote area, and then your fly rod breaks, or you somehow, I've never done it, but you drop your rod in the water, something like that. So I always have 2 rods with me. Mm-hmm. And I love the storage on the big rig, the mayfly. A lot of them have spots where you can lash the rods down. It has a cutout to perfectly fit the reel, that it's got straps. So
you can have your rods like rigged and ready to go, so that if you have to make that quick change,
or just you got 2 ready to go in case something happens. And the net, I have a big net always, and that kind of is under my seat, almost like digging at my heels a little bit under the seat, and it's backwards. So I can just reach around with one hand and slide it out while I'm fighting the fish and scoop it up.
Yep.
I've got usually one, if not a second, a kind of briefcase fly box. This might be something that I'd bring just for a quick trip, something like that.
And so you're telling me that you're taking flies like that when you go trout fishing?
No.
Okay. Because I put this.
These are the size of a trout. Then I'm using them to go for muskie.
Right. I pulled this picture up earlier because you sent me, and I'm like, is this his trout box? Because I want to catch those trout.
Yeah. The bycatch, once in a while, you will catch a jumbo smallmouth. I have had enormous browns attack, 9 to 10 inch flies before. Never was able to land them. They got off. But I know some really good friends who have been pike fishing and have caught browns in the 30-inch-ish, brown on a 12-inch fly. So I have 1 or 2 of these boxes that are pretty big, and they fit right under the big rig seat. And then to the right and left, there's more storages for pliers. I usually have long pliers. I've got some, jaw openers, stuff like that.
So tell me how that works. So that's to keep allow you to be able to get the fly back safely, and just keeping
most of the time, the flies, you can get out, the fish is in the net, it's in the water, and with pliers, you can just reach over, and normally the fly comes out no problem. Sometimes it even just falls out before, but there's a rare time. Sometimes the smaller pike will inhale the whole thing, and the jaw spreader comes into play. You're almost you're like a doctor all of a sudden. You do a little surgery, but generally there's not an issue of getting them unhooked. It's pretty rare. Growing up a hardcore spin fisherman for them, I used to use lures that were covered in treble hooks. Yeah, and that would be, it was a nightmare.
That could be both dangerous for you, and you get that fish to the boat and they just start going nuts.
You can get a hook in your hand. It's still in the fish's mouth, or there's a hook in the fish's mouth and then another treble hook stuck to the side of its head. Probably not that common, but it's just most flies that I have just have a single hook. Nice. Some have articulated, so they have two single hooks.
Right.
But so, and then so I've got a fly box or two under my seat. To the right or left, there's little storage spots in the big rig and most of the kayaks that Jackson makes that I'll have jaw spreaders, the nets behind me. I've got the pliers. And in the back of the seat, I generally have a fly vest or a real small backpack on a carabiner, just kind of on the back of the seat. Mm-hmm. And I will have my license, maybe a rain jacket, sunscreen, stuff like that. Maybe a water bottle, a bit of food, whatever.
Yeah. So you're not really, you're kind of going with the kayak as it comes, and then just kind of, storing your stuff. I got a picture here. We'll bring up, you can't really see it super close. Let's actually just make that full screen, but you can kind of see that you don't really have any like rod holders sticking out. There's no crate in the back. You got it really simple. And sometimes that's what I love about fly fishing is that you can, we were talking about this, just grab a couple of rods and go somewhere with a fly box and a couple of rods. You don't have all this stuff you got to drag with you. Of course, every time I do that, the wind's blowing 50 mile an hour. And Chris Funk and I joke that, one of us is the reason if we bring a fly rod that the wind is blowing that way, because every time we take a fly rod, it's like, well, you're not going to get to fly fish. I don't know why you brought that. And I can imagine that throwing those big flies would definitely be a little tougher in a windy situation than, say if you're throwing like a net for trout or something. Yeah.
And what you want to do is generally on a river, there'll be, corners and straight areas where there's no wind, and then you come to a corner and it's windy. I try to paddle up as far as I want to go and let the wind just kind of push me at a natural pace down.
Yeah.
On a lake or something, that'd be a little bit more difficult, but usually with a little bit of current, a little bit of wind, you barely have to paddle, which is pretty nice. So I have broke one paddle once. So I generally keep an extra paddle underneath the kayak, in the storage.
Yeah.
Take it half. And then in front of all the JKs, there's a spot for the paddle to sit flat, like the end slides.
The staging area.
Yep. And so that's pretty much all I bring with me. I bring, and I always wear a life jacket, of course, too. And that photo from the drone was by Matt Dickerson, and he's an author and writes in the local paper, and that was for an article for do it yourself fishing.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. He was able to. I wasn't able to land one when he was doing that, but it's pretty cool to see, to be working with photographers and to have them flying drones around you. And
yeah, hopefully not hitting you or crashing them in the water like I do typically.
Yeah, you're so used to seeing the water from your perspective, so it's really cool to watch it back and have them, fly up, and it's pretty cool to do that. The once in a while I'll take the seat out as well, and I'll put an Orion cooler where the seat was. And,
nice, because you're probably standing up a lot once you get out there.
Yeah, I almost, especially in the big rig, I almost never sit down. I paddle when I'm standing up. I'm casting. I'm always definitely retrieving. That was on 4th of July, I believe.
Nice, get the flag going.
Yeah, I got that idea from Joey.
Nice.
And so he basically, sometimes I'll have to sit down if you see how that the tree branches are maybe a few feet above the water.
Mm-hmm.
So when the water on that river is much higher and it's like kind of leaking over the bank, I'll have to sit down so I can kind of sidearm the flies to get back in there. But if there's enough room to stand up and kind of cast underneath the stuff like that, I prefer to stand up. And one of the ways I've found that saves a lot of paddling is when you're retrieving in a pike or muskie fly, and I do this also when I'm doing topwater bass, is I have my rod tip, a third of my rod's in the water. And when you get the fly close to you, especially with muskie, you want to give that some movement. You want to do some figure eights, some big C's, some S's in case there's a muskie following that you haven't spotted. And you really want to work that around for. Some people do it for minutes and minutes every cast.
That's crazy.
But so you're floating down this river at a gentle pace, or the wind's pushing you around a little bit. When you're about to take your fly out of the water and your rod's in the water, you can move it a certain way, and it corrects the front of your kayak to the direction you want to stay. You pull out, you recast, you're going perfect where you want to for the full next cast. And so you don't have to like bend over, pick up the paddle a lot if you make micro adjustments with your fly rod in the water.
Right.
That saves a lot of time.
So let's get into that. If I'm getting into this for the first time and I want to, pick up a rod and reel setup, what am I going to look for? What line, what reel weight, what rod weight, and what am I going to need to get started to chase pike and muskie?
So I'm way more of a pike guy.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely love muskie, and they're around, and I've traveled to, St. Lawrence tributaries, got them to the Ottawa River in Canada. But mostly what I chase is pike right in my local river. And so for that, I would do an 8, 9, possibly a 10 weight. Usually I'm throwing, if I have 2 rods, one of them is going to be for pike. One's going to be an 8 weight and one's going to be a 10 weight. And if I'm doing muskie, if I have 2 rods, I'd have a 10 weight and probably an 11 weight. So you could get away with just getting a 10 and do both. If you're getting 1 rod, you could also then use that for saltwater stuff. I don't know what you use for redfish. Do you use an 8 or a 10 weight?
Yeah, it depends on the fly. I use an 8 most of the time. But if you're in some wind and you want to cast a little bit bigger popper or something, definitely a 10 can get it out there a little bit easier.
Yeah. So I would say if you want to get 1 rod for pike and muskie, I would get a 10 weight. You're gonna want a reel that has a large arbor. So I would use one that matches the line of a 10 weight reel. Yeah. And by large arbor, I mean, if you're used to a trout reel, I mean, look at the size of this one. This is just a beast of a reel. And I load these with, a bunch of backing. And then typically I run the Rio Pike or Rio Pike Muskie line. So it's really nice. The line is floating line, and then the last, I want to say 30 feet or so is a sink tip that's built in.
Okay.
So with pike and muskie, you want to get the flies closer to banks, drop offs, weed lines. There's a little river or a ditch coming in, those areas. You want to get them down fast and then strip them in fast. So you want to get them down to a certain level quickly and then bring them in. And also the advantage of a sink tip is when you have to fly to the tip of your kayak and you want to start doing the figure eights and the kind of the finishing moves, the fly stays down a few feet. If you're using floating line and a fly that's not heavily weighted, and you see a big fish roll in, and then it kind of lazily sinks a little bit, your fly's too high in the water. But if you have a heavier fly and a sink tip, and that thing happens, you can just let a little line out, maybe jiggle the handle a little bit and see if it comes back and gets it.
Yeah.
So I like to use Rio, but there's Orbit. Like almost every company makes a line that's in the 8, 9, 10, 12 weight that has a built-in sink tip.
Right.
You can also get a full sink line. All the line sinks, and that's just a little bit harder to manage in a kayak. I think if you were stripping it into a stripping basket, it'd be fine. But one issue is if you make a really long cast and you're stripping line in and it's not always landing in the kayak, if it's sinking line, it starts sinking in the water. And especially where I am, I'm going over a lot of timber and log jams. And it happens usually every time I go, but eventually your fly is like 30 feet from you, and the line that you're stripping in gets caught right off your reel, like on something below you, and you're floating a little bit, and all of a sudden you're snagged and your fly's still in the water.
Yeah.
And
that's about the time that a muskie or a pike would hit for me, is right when everything would be just completely messed up. And I mean, that's aggravating even when you don't have sinking line. If that line falls off and goes into the water or whatever and starts dragging, then you can run into those issues for sure. So you're going from the sink tip line, and then you run a fluorocarbon or some type of monofilament tapered leader.
Yeah, so there's a built-in loop on the end of the line, and I usually use an old trout leader, like we call it the butt section. So if you have a trout leader, it's a 9-foot, 10-pound leader. After that leader is kind of chewed up and there's only like 5 feet of it, it's pretty thick. I would say it's probably 30 or 40-pound test. So sometimes I just use one of those, and I cut it down to about 2 feet. And it already has a nice pre-made loop in it. Mm-hmm. But quite often I also will carry just a spool of tippet of 35-pound test mono, and then 50-pound test mono. And I'll just strip off like an arm length, make a perfection loop, and do a loop-to-loop connection. So when you're using big flies off a sink tip, even for trout and smallmouths and stuff, and I usually use a leader that's, not even 3 feet long. Because
so from the line, you're only going like 3 feet. And
if I'm going only for muskie, it might be 20 inches.
Wow.
Basically, when you're doing figure eights and you're working the fly around the tip of your kayak and trying to keep it down, you have all of your line up into your rod, and you only have out like 20 inches of line. And I don't know how many times I've had muskie in the 30 to 44 inch range eat a fly literally 10 to 20 inches off the tip of my fly rod, literally a foot from my kayak.
Wow.
There's nothing like it because you're standing up in a kayak. There's all the excitement of watching the fish come in, and it's following. Sometimes your arm is getting a little bit tired from doing the figure eights, and it's just following it. And by this time,
that'd be so frustrating.
It feels so ridiculous. So when it actually happens, generally, it's hard to get a good hook set. Now, if you imagine you make a 50-foot cast to the bank or a log jam, and you have your fly rod in the water, the tip, the line is all straight, and you move that fly like 3 feet and a fish hits, and you can make a good like strip set, and you get a solid hook up on it, and now you're fighting that fish all the way into your net. I mean, you've broken its will a little bit. You try to land on hot.
Yeah.
But when it happens, when you're standing up in a kayak, a foot in front of you, it's hard to get a good hook set.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a fly rod, you don't have, you got a lot more give, so you can't really set it. And I mean, even when I'm bass fishing or something with a bait caster, if a fish hits that close, a lot of times I'll just like hit the bell and like let it take a little bit of line just so that I can confidently like jar down on it and get that hook set. So is that it? Do you do that? Do you like feed it a little bit of line and then try to strip set again, or?
So yeah, you want to do another strip set, but I generally I kind of almost out of instinct, I just have my hand around the line, around the cork, and I have both hands on the handle, and I try to do a keep side pressure on the fish, and generally the kayak will spin towards it.
Yeah.
So also if you're standing in a boat or on the bank, when you set the hook on a fish, like your heels are kind of dug in, but when you're on a kayak, you kind of like you get pulled towards the fish a little bit.
Right.
And they burst off. And if it's a big fish, if it's a 15, 20, 25 pound fish, like it'll pull you for a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a 2-pound bass will move the kayak. So
yeah. So you will let a little line out because you don't want them to break something. So you let line out, but only when they're ripping it out of your hand a little bit.
Right.
Then when it's sideways from you, when you feel like it's right, then you do a heck of a strip set. And sometimes you end up pulling the fly out of their mouth. Sometimes you get a good hook set and you're able to land that fish. So I think, a lot of people say, there's that common phrase of fly fishing for muskies, like 10,000 cast. But I think that's out of a boat with like gear.
Yeah, I think I'm at like 40 or 50,000, maybe more at this point.
Yeah, I think when you're doing it out of a kayak, with flies, I think the odds are a little bit against you. It might not be the smartest way. Like if you're going for dinner, it probably isn't the best way to do it.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing just like bow hunting or fly fishing for anything, like it's probably more challenging, but it's in like you reap it in the reward, right? Like you finally get one of these, giant fish to the just pull this up. I mean, when you get one of these guys to hand, that's a pretty good one. That's nothing compared to the one we showed earlier. But when you get these fish, I mean, it's got to be worth it though.
Yep. So that was a muskie that I caught in a Lake Champlain tributary, and my buddy Nick Mayer took that photo. My buddy Kevin Ramirez tied the fly. I mean, it's really great. And like I said, growing up spin fishing, you kind of use the same lures over and over. Big daredevils, big yozuris, big, rapalas, stuff like that. Big Meps 5s or whatever. But what I love about fly fishing is most of the flies I use were tied by my friends or people that I know, or and so I could text my buddy that picture and be like, I can't believe, I got this fly from you and look what it caught me. Like,
yeah,
give him a high five and, 6-pack of beer the next time I see him. Or,
it's like it took a village to catch the fly.
Yeah. And so
to catch the fish.
I think that's really great. The folks tying flies like that, those flies just come alive in the water. And because of the way they come in and they have single hooks on them, I feel a lot more confident pitching them into like log jams and under trees, and you can let them sit on the bottom for a second and then pull them in. But when I was using lures, man, like a big Daredevil, the biggest ones they make, if that got near anything, it was snagged. It was so heavy.
And those are not cheap, which I'm sure the flies, of course, you got buddies tying them, but I'm sure if you're buying musky flies, they're not cheap either. But those big lures are expensive.
Yeah, these big pike and musky flies, they're $12 to $25 or more.
Wow.
Depending on the materials, maybe who tied them. But they could take the person 45 minutes, an hour and a half to tie one.
That's crazy.
If you're tying, trout streamers, you could tie, a dozen in that time. So there's a lot of them basically has two big flies the size of your hand, and then they connect them. So it's a lot of time and material to tie one of those flies. But
so in this picture, I want to get into the actual flies here in just a minute, and kind of like your go-to, like I couldn't leave the house without at least this, few here in my box. But looking at this picture, I can see that you've got some leader tied on to your tippet there. So, you're saying roughly 20 inches to at the max around 3 feet. But then you're running, it looks like about a foot or so of, is that still leader?
Yeah. So, right. So you have your fly line to, a short piece, and everyone does it different. This is just what works for me. And I kind of just do it just nonchalantly and just go. But I use the same steel leaders that I grew up using. I get them at my local tackle shop, $2. I get 3 leaders, and they're 9 inch, 30-pound leaders with a snap swivel.
So only 30 pounds. That's interesting. But I guess because it's steel, really, is all you're trying to do is prevent the
steel,
teeth.
9 inches. Only maybe once or twice have I had a pike or a muskie eat above the 9 inches or, break me off. My friend Austin Green took that photo, and that is a really nice pike. But if you, compare that to like the first one that you showed, I mean,
that's this one.
But yeah. But that picture is one of my favorite muskie flies ever. I was fishing for muskie when I caught that pike, and that's the Pat Cohen's man bear pig. And also the flies have such good names.
It's a man bear pig.
Man bear pig. I can finish about the leaders, and then I'll go over some of my favorite flies.
Yeah, and that's why I pulled this photo up. You can kind of see that you're using that leader in that shot right there.
Yeah. So I do 20, 30 inches at most of between 30 and 50-pound test off from the line to a 9-inch steel leader with a snap swivel. And then I can change out flies quickly. If I'm doing top water, I will use floating line, still 10 weight floating line, and I'll use I'll use a full 6 to 7 feet or so of 50 pounds. Mm-hmm. And then generally I will use, several companies have like a tippet spool that's wire. I will put a little split ring on the end of the 5 to 7 feet of line, and then I'll tie a piece of wire, then cut it off at about 7 inches, and then tie that to the fly.
Okay. I just give them that bite leader, just tiny. You don't need much.
Just bite leader, and I feel like it doesn't mess with the topwater flies as much. And then a lot of times when I'm doing largemouth bass, topwater stuff, there's generally the same lakes and ponds that I do topwater bass have pike. So that's a good example. That was a fly that Pat Cohen also tied. That's a duck. It's a Merganser duck the size of my hand. And so I'm using that for largemouth bass out of my kayak in a tournament called the Ditch Pickle Classic. the bass tournament.
And for those of you who don't know, that is a term that a lot of people use for largemouth ditch
yeah,
fish.
So it's a Lake Champlain fly fishing tournament. Over 100 of us do it. And Nick Mayer also took that picture. And so when I'm using a fly like that, I will use a little bit of bite wire. Even though I'm targeting bass, I just would hate to lose like a $20-$30 fly to a pike that would come up and grab it. But if I'm just using like a hard popper or a small deer hair popper, I don't use it. But if I think there's a chance of a big pike coming up to grab, even if I'm bass fishing, sometimes I'll use bite wire.
Well, I'm sure it doesn't, as long as it's not affecting the presentation.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I do the same thing. I use fluorocarbon leader pretty much no matter what. And I get a lot of buddies that, they're throwing moving baits and they'll just tie straight to braid, or even on top water because braid floats, they'll tie, but I pretty much run a fluorocarbon leader on everything just because I'm like, if it ain't hurting, if it helps at all, like I'd rather take that chance than, worry about it. So it makes perfect sense. And you've got a couple of nice bass pictures you sent me. I'm going to pull this one up as well. So you're definitely getting some nice bass on fly too. Which again, I just imagine it's got to be more rewarding to be able to execute that and get them like that. I love to fly fish. I know for me it's challenging from the kayak. So I really respect you guys that are able to make it happen and then land giant fish. That you've been able to land as well. So let's dive into the flies.
So I guess you probably can't see it, but I have a Ryan cooler behind me, and all on top of it, I've got a bunch of flies. So I also use smaller boxes. Shout out to Vermont Fly Guys, and so this would be more for like if I'm going for just pike, so kind of a smaller box. I can easily just have, quite a few flies in there. This year I've caught pike on this fly, which my buddy tied when we were on Albee Chip in Martha's Vineyard Expo. But I would hate to be like I said, if that was like a little rainbow you caught, and now you put that in front of a pike and it's not even going to think twice. I've caught pike on that this year. Brian Price of the Vermont Fly Guys, I've caught pike on this one this year.
So this looks like it would be a bear to throw. I mean,
it's really cool. When I first started fly fishing for pike, I would just hit up like the like a saltwater section and like LL Bean. And I mean, they didn't have flies like this. So this is a giant hook. It's got big dumbbell eyes, a lot of pink and white. And then it's articulated 2 times with a giant rubber tail. I mean, it's probably like, over a foot long. Around here, baby perch is one of the favorite pike flies. This one has caught so many fish that's missing the eyes. It's missing some of the fiber, but I also in my vest I have a hook sharpener. Almost every time I put a fly on, I do the trick, dig your thumbnail, and I sharpen that hook up, just to make sure.
That's good advice.
This one is actually called the Indiana James.
Do we want to share why it's called the Indiana James?
All right, so James is the is he marketing director of Jackson?
Yeah, that's right. James Macbeth, our marketing director here at Jackson Kayak. Again, We're touching base on the fact that he's won 2 world championships, one in a fly fishing muskie tournament here in Tennessee. So I'm guessing that fly had something to do with it.
So he messaged me about fly fishing for muskie and pike and where do I get my flies, because he was running the same issue. And so I hooked him up with the Vermont Fly Guys, and they send him a bunch of flies, mostly, big stuff, like big articulated stuff. And there was a couple flies in the batch that they had used, but they didn't even have names or anything. And I guess James ended up using, just this bait fish pattern, and ended up hooking into a big muskie. Story has it he fought it through a rapid or two standing up, and finally landed it, and ended up, being the biggest one in the muskie tournament. And he was one of the few anglers in a kayak as well. And a couple of days after the tournament, he asked the guys what the fly was called, because he wanted to tell them which one he caught it on. And they said, well, it doesn't have a name. It's just kind of a random bait fish pattern, maybe something like Joe Brooks, or I don't even know, tied up. So they dubbed it the Indiana James. And
great.
I still, on that same pattern, I've caught pike, muskie, largemouth, smallmouth. I've used it for saltwater. I've caught striped bass on it. It's just an awesome pattern. So this would be kind of like my go-to, just kind of pike box.
I'm going to pull this picture up. Is this kind of a good representation?
Yeah, definitely.
Of your pike box. A lot of big streamers, looks like you've got is that a mouse pattern?
Yep. I do topwater. And, generally when I'm fishing topwater, I still will use sinking line. So if I'm into like a log jam, or kind of like where a little ditch flows into a bigger river where it's maybe like knee deep or so in the mouth of it, and only a couple feet wide, you can throw a big mouse pattern or a frog pattern or, something, a big gurgler or whatever, up into those areas with a sinking line. And you can pull it, 10, 15 feet before it sinks much more than, because you're bringing it so fast.
Right.
Maybe it's only down 6 inches. And even by the time it gets back to you, it's only down maybe 6 inches. And because that fly is trying to float and you're trying to make it sink and you're stripping it in fast, it's so much more erratic than if you were just using floating line. That's
a good tip. And, people would probably think, hey, I want to use floating line to keep it above the water, but and like we kind of mentioned this, pike are aggressive. Like they're just going to smash it.
Yeah. And sometimes if you wait long enough, it'll come back to the surface. But generally, they'll, even if it's down 6 inches or so and it's a big rat pattern the size of your hand, when a pike or muskie hits it, they still come up out of the water with it. And it's almost like addicting, and you'll work like an hour or two straight with something like that. And it's you're just anticipating something huge is going to hit it every time you move it. And when it finally happens, it's just real crazy. But this fly had a lot of action last year for muskie. I don't know if it's hard to tell.
What is that even supposed to be? Come on, man! Like that's. I
think it's supposed to be like
a big sucker. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Sucker. My buddy Kevin tied that. I got some muskie on this one the last few years. Big pink white.
Do you find okay? So let's talk colors a little bit. I know for me, obviously for smallmouth, like I'm a big chartreuse fan, chartreuse and white, especially when you got a little bit. I don't want to say clean water, but like in between dirty water and clean water, just a little bit of stain on the water. And then obviously like your black and blues, your darker colors tend to do well in really dirty water because it has more contrast, or like who knows why, right? But with pike and muskie, how do you choose your color options? Are you going more natural colors in clean, clear water and brighter colors in dirty water, or is it vice versa, or does it even matter?
I think everyone's, like you mentioned, black and blue. Like everyone's going to have their confidence colors. Mine is pink white. I use that in dark water, stained water, clear water. I think there's rainbow trout living around here.
Right.
I don't know. I just love pink white. Black purple is my like kind of dark fly I'll use. Fire tiger or yellow orange olive are both really good for me. all black. This is kind of a black purple fly. This is the joke Godspeed fly. Black purple, something like that. I don't know if you could even see that, but those.
Yeah, sure we can.
But if you look in the box, it looks like I don't even know, Halloween in there. You've got so many different colors, so much craziness. All orange.
It's awesome.
All orange can be really good. Anything perch. If I had to choose 5 colors, it would be all white, pink white, perch, black purple, and probably lime white.
So when you're saying perch, you're talking something like this with the orange and chartreuse colors?
Yep, like a fire tiger or perch. A lot of orange, yellow, and green mixed in.
Nice. So you are driving to the ramp, and you've got all your gear, and you get there, and you unload your kayak, and you look through, and you've forgotten one item. And you're like, I have to turn around and go back and get this item, because if I go fishing without it, I'm going to regret it. What would that item be?
Well, last year it was the paddle.
Yeah, for sure.
But then I had a paddle in the kayak
underneath the spare,
it.
Right.
I had the spare, so I went with that. Probably it would be, I would hate to go without the big net.
Yeah, I would imagine handling these fish,
I
I
mean,
didn't even know what to do once I got it to the kayak if I didn't have a net.
Yeah. Even if I'm just fishing from the shore, you can kind of beach the fish, get their head out a little bit if you still have the pliers. But I did want to mention somewhere is like the handling these fish with care. Just because it's a really big, mean, toothy looking fish, you still have to have a lot of respect for these fish and just handle them with care. I mean, like I said, you want to have a rod that's built tough to land them quickly. I've seen people like sometimes play to fish forever and ever and ever, and you want to land this fish as soon as possible, partly because then it has less chances to get away. That's
yeah.
So land them quickly, have an oversized net, get them in the net as soon as possible, and then keep them in the net underwater while you're looking for a camera or pliers or whatever you need. Most of the time I hang onto the net with one hand and I paddle to somewhere within sight quickly and I jump out of the boat. There was a few pictures that you showed where I was in the kayak with them. One of them, there was nowhere to get out. And the other one was kind of a smaller pike. And my friend Austin had the camera up, so I just held it up quick. But 9 times out of 10, I get out of the kayak as quickly as I can. And while the fish is in the net, I get the GoPro ready. It takes, a couple seconds. I get the pliers out. And I just, keep that fish, get your hands wet, obviously, and just get a good release. I just see a lot of people kind of dragging the fish up into the shore. It's flopping around, right. I'm not talking anyone in particular, but and then they're asking their friend to go to the truck to get the pliers.
Yeah. You probably, I can see people taking it for granted. Oh, this is a big giant fish. It's going to be super hardy. I can do this to it, but they're cold water fish. So especially down here in North Carolina, when you get the warmer temperatures, I imagine in the warmer months, you don't want to keep them out of that water very long. It's get them back, get the picture quick, get a good release on the fish. Just trying to take care of it so that they're there for the next person to enjoy it for sure.
Yeah. I just want to throw it up there. it's a total respect factor with, any kind of the fish. You're going for trout. Even carp, I'm wetting my hands and it's just,
Well, it's definitely a big part of it, and it's something that I've learned through probably doing it wrong, or not even knowing that I was doing it wrong through ignorance of, how to handle, like, especially heavier fish. When you get into like a big redfish, you want to support its weight, not put all that pressure on its jaw or whatever. Bogas, I know they're kind of frowned upon now and just about everywhere. As long as you're supporting the weight of the fish, I'm sure they're okay. But you don't want to lift a big heavy fish out of the water just by its lower jaw. I mean, think about that; it's a lot of weight. For sure on the fish. So having a big net, I imagine, is really important, and it keeps you safer too with all the hooks and the teeth and everything else that's around.
So it's a couple of things about that is it's not a bad idea also, and somewhere on you, if it's behind the seat in a little pack with your other snacks and sunscreen is, I try to bring a couple of Band-Aids too, because it's very easy to just get a nick from a pike of a tooth of a pike or muskie, or or just as a strip guard. You get a lot of after casting big flies all day, if you're running it through your fingers, you can use these things like strip guards, but sometimes just putting a Band-Aid will help as well. Or if you get a little nick from a tooth or a hook or whatever, can kind of keep you going.
Like razor sharp too. So I mean, you don't even probably realize you're getting cut. I got to pull this picture up. We're kind of getting close on time. I told you this; it goes by fast. But I didn't know they had muskie in like tropical places. What's up with this photo?
Okay, so
this is a giant fish, but fish come from there.
Yeah. Okay, so I think people are really brave online, behind the keyboard. So, on Instagram, I'm VT Pike Bum on Instagram. And I was in my kayak fly fishing for bowfin on Lake Champlain. I caught one and then just hit a spot by foot on the way home. And there were some people around within sight, kind of a popular area, and just threw this fly out, and I caught that fish. A guy maybe 20 feet from me who was fishing with his little kid. I had the net next to me. I had everything I should have, but he ran up and helped me land that. It was a 47-inch muskie. It's still my biggest and heaviest one. And I held it up for a quick picture, released it, I swam away strong. And the picture showed a little bit of the background on the very far side of a big river. And then someone, commented, I know where that is. And then, the next morning there was a couple hundred likes and bunch of comments, and a few people were like, you're going to blow up that spot. I mean, there was literally 20 people fishing within sight of me.
And that's tough. I mean, when you're talking rivers, because you are limited on space, but inevitably someone knows where you're at. I mean, I post pictures, and I try to take them, but at the end of the day, hey, if you recognize the spot, then you already know about the spot, And so,
so I deleted the picture, I sent it to a buddy, and he used an app that made the whole background look like blotchy camo.
Yeah.
Reposted it. And then I'm getting comments, oh, you have to be so secretive. Right. So then my buddy texted me that picture, Zach Griswold, he, found a Jamaican looking spot and imposed me on it.
It totally
I posted that picture, and then I got a comment like, you should never bring a muskie that far up in the sand. It's really bad for them.
I know exactly where your palm tree is, man. I fish there all the time.
So, from being also a guide, something I didn't think about a long time ago is when you take photos, it has to be a great photo. The fish has to be wet. There can't be any mud or rocks on it or grass. You can't show the background. Stuff like that. You can't just have the fish laying down in grass. You have to, if you're going to get a photo, you have to do it quickly, but you have to get a good shot.
Yeah.
or you shouldn't post it. You know, you can text it to your buddy, but you'll get, so there's
Well,
any
and
blood on it.
it is definitely aggravating and a challenge, but we say all that to say that it is important to take care of the fish and respect the spots for sure. But yeah, it gets a little ridiculous. So we approached the hour, we passed the hour. So I am going to have to kind of usher this along. We could sit here and talk fishing all night, and I'd love to. But what I'm curious is where, if people wanted to get more information from you or just had questions and they wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you and ask those pike, muskie, or just fly fishing in general questions from a kayak?
Well, our guide service is called Stream and Brook Fly Fishing. Website, Instagram, Facebook. We don't guide for out of kayaks really, or guide for muskie, but contact info's there. I've been lucky enough to get in some books and films. You can check out Pursuing Essex by Austin Green. That's a cool one. This book right here, 50 best places to fly fish in the Northeast. I was lucky enough to write a chapter in there on the Otter Creek, which is where I do most of my pike fishing. It's got maps. It's got some cool stuff. And you can get that book. I think you can buy that chapter online as well. Or I'm at VT Pike Bum on Instagram. But yeah, I just love to go out and chase big fish around. It's a blast. Obviously,
you've got it kind of figured out. You've been, published, like you said. Here's a picture. You did an article here in the magazine. So, well, Brian, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been very helpful for me, and this is going to live on. So I know we'll probably get some questions. So look back at the video and check the comments because people will have questions I obviously will not have all the answers for. And again, I just really appreciate you hanging out with us, and I hope you stay safe through all this, and we'll get through it together, I hope. So.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about this, and I know we have to go, but I hope that we can link up and do some JK media stuff.
Yes, for sure. I know we've kind of had it planned, it seems like 3 or 4 different times over the last 5 years. And something keeps happening, but hopefully when all this is over, we can come north. That one quick question. I mean, time of year, what are you looking for? Is this kind of the peak time? How does that season go for you up there in the Northeast?
Pike and muskie are at their heaviest in the fall, extreme fall, but they can be hard to target. So I would say from May through September is probably May through June is prime time, and then back September through October, early November. If I had to pick, for the Northeast, I think in the South where you are, kind of the winter time is the best because
it definitely people definitely target, and it gets harder to fish for the smallmouth and stuff. I mean, they kind of school up and you got to find them, and when you do find them, they're usually stacked together in a certain spot. But for sure, well, I mean that's if you're looking to go up there, hopefully this will be cleared out and it'll be perfect timing to be able to get up there in the fall and catch the leaves changing and some big toothy critters for sure. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm going to pull you down here and say my goodbyes. I want to thank everybody for watching for sure. And thanks for the talk. Again, you guys can reach out to him on Facebook and Instagram and ask him, just bug him all day long about catching fish. He's probably stuck at home right now. So.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it. All right, guys, that is another episode of Tech Talking. I appreciate you guys. I know we went a little long here, but I appreciate you guys sticking around. Keep pushing your comments out and your questions out. We'll keep checking back and looking at these videos and seeing if we can answer any questions for those that aren't watching live. I'm also looking into putting these out as a podcast, kind of download the audio. Hopefully, I know a lot of it's visual, but if you guys are interested in that, please let me know in the comments as well. And also like and share and get this out. I do want to give one more quick shout out to Fish USA. Again, we're partnering with them I want to make sure I get the name right. But we're doing the Rethink Food NYC. And again, that is getting food to people that are in need. So if you buy a Jackson kayak from Fish USA, we're partnering with them to not only give you $100 towards your future purchase at Fish USA, but also $100 is going to go to that Rethink Food in NYC thing, which is great because that's where we're getting hit the hardest here in the United States. Obviously, is New York, and there's a lot of people that are sick, but also people that have traveled there away from their homes. That are up there, providing food and trying to give care for the people that are sick. And of course, that's, kind of be stressful on them and their families. So anything we can do to help. So that's a great thing that Fish USA is doing along with us here at Jackson. So again, thank you guys. Stay safe. I hate to say it, stay home as much as you can. If you can get out, do the things, the proper things, the social distancing, the washing of the hands, and stay positive through all this. We can't let it get us down. We've got to move forward. And this is the perfect time. I don't want to say perfect time because it's obviously not a good time, but if you're stuck at home and you don't have anything else to do, definitely get that rigging and get that next trip kind of ready and prepared. Again, thank you guys for watching. Please share, please comment, and please like. Hope everyone has a great night. See you next week.